Okay, we are recording to the cloud. We're live on YouTube and we have a quorum. So, oh, here comes PJ. Just let me let him in. Okay, I'm marking everybody too, Jen. Yep. Okay, so I think we're going to get going. I'll let people in as we go along. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. Thanks again for being here on our April meeting of the POCD Oversight Committee is 4:03. So I'll call the meeting to order. The first business on the agenda is acceptance of the March 16th, 2021 meetings. You all received a copy of the meeting minutes. So if anybody has any unless anybody has any comments, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Finaldi, seconded by Mr. Visconti. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? Okay, motion carried. Okay, I'm going to turn it right over to Francisco and let him get into today's discussion. I think these are really good topics, some more demographic information, and then we're going to chat about the city's neighborhoods and where we go from there. So, Francisco.
Okay.
You're on.
Thanks, Sharon. I'll share my screen.
Oh, hold on. I may have to let
once you enable it.
Yeah, I think you're good now.
Okay. All right. Okay, we should be full screen now. Can everyone see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let me just move all of your wonderful headshots to a place where I can see both you and the presentation. All right. Well, welcome back. It's good to see everyone again. And another month has passed, which means we have another month worth of work that our team has done on the POCD and some of our existing conditions findings. So we're eager to share that with you. And this is meeting number 6 of our committee. Our agenda today, we are going to dive into the geography of Danbury. We talked a lot last time about demographics and a lot of statistics, and not a lot about where those are spread through the city and how it differs from one end of the city to another. So our discussion today is going to be very map-based and geographic-based. So we're going to try to pull all those statistics in and spread them out on the map to see how different parts of the city compare. So we have a number of slides for you on that topic. And like before, if there's a real outstanding question that you have, any huge oversight on my part about level of detail, feel free. I'll take a little pause after each slide and feel free to speak up. If you just have general questions or comments, let's hold off until I get through all the content. So we'll just, we'll make it work.
Francisco, before you dive in, just remember everybody, if you could stay on mute.
Yes.
Until we speak, so we don't get any feedback. Thanks.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Mm-hmm. And then what I'd like to do is talk about your geographies, spend a little time, help me understand your neighborhoods, if you want to call them that. Some cities in Connecticut, such as Hartford and Bridgeport, are carved up into neighborhood revitalization zones, or NRZs, which have very delineated boundaries for state purposes. You don't have those to work with. So I think everyone's perception of which neighborhoods are where and what the boundaries are in Danbury is probably pretty fuzzy. And for the sake of this plan, it would be helpful to have a better understanding of what you consider to be over there and part of that area of town or neighborhood and what's over there. It'll help us frame things as we start to develop the plan. And then we'll review the planning work that we're doing for outreach towards the end of this, and talk a little bit about the website and our schedule moving forward, of course. So let's jump into it. Population density. I think, let me preface these slides and maps by saying, I think many of them are going to be exactly what you would expect, right? Let's use this map as an example. The downtown area, it is the densest in population, and that's likely what you would expect. That's, we have apartment buildings and maybe some student housing and mixed use buildings with apartments, smaller lot sizes, less open space, a lot of factors that go into this. So generally what we see is the immediate downtown area is the densest. And we talk about dense, we talk about 10,000 or so people per square mile in that order of magnitude. The western and southern part of the city is, you can see the lightest green there, is definitely the least dense. The southern part of the city, in that southern kind of square or rectangle of the city, it is really dominated by open space. So there's a lot of things driving the lack of density there, and larger lots as well. And then the eastern part of the city is slightly denser, a little less open space, and a lot of neighborhoods. So that's how it plays out. This mapping is done by census block, and that is about the most granular level of detail we can get for most of these statistics. We do have some of it, census tract, excuse me. We do have some of it by census block, but not as much data and not as current data is available to us. So a census tract it varies quite a bit, as you can see the different colors. It varies quite a bit in size. There's a lot of metrics that go into carving these things up. It partially based on population. And blocks are typically smaller pieces of a tract, but we're working almost exclusively at census tract level here. All right, is there any questions on that before I start moving through the rest of these? All right, as we get further into this process and as we start to uncover issues or real questions that we have that we need to formulate some policy and recommendations around, we can dive a little deeper into the details, block level, or do a little more homework to figure out what the driver is behind some of these statistics. Median household income. And we're starting with some of the big drivers of social and economic forces here, is population and the income that population has. These are really the big drivers. And what we see in Danbury is much of the city is in a very similar median household income level. And that's a relatively high level for a city. We're talking up $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 plus. And that's the periphery. And what we also see is the downtown core area immediately south of 84 along the rail corridor is where your lowest incomes are. And those are and this is median household income. And these are in the 40s to 50s in that range. We have one anomaly on this map that's going to show up in different ways from map to map, and that's the prison. And this is actually a topic right now in the census tract planning demographic world. How do you treat prison populations? As of now, they're treated at where they live. They're treated as residents of the city of Danbury as prison inmates. So the census information and data picks up information from them, but it it presents in very strange and unpredictable ways, depending on how that information is collected, because those individuals may or may not be reporting that they're a member of a family or a household back home. So that's one anomaly. I wouldn't put too much weight on anything in that area says, and we try to label it on the map because it acts differently than everything around it. But generally speaking, we see what's I think most impressive is the fact that for a city, the incomes are pretty high and over such a wide geography, and that your lower income levels are so concentrated to a relatively small geography. All right. Poverty levels, this map corresponds very highly with the poverty levels. And these maps look a little different because these maps were obtained from a different data source that we don't have access to bring into our mapping system. So we're pulling their maps. So they're not formatted the same, but this is all drawing upon a US Census data, and that being, in most cases, American Community Survey data, which we talked about last time, is the most recent data available. Poverty levels we see concentrated in the downtown, with the downtown area itself the highest at about 23% of poverty. And this is based on population. The lowest levels, as you can see in the north area, Clapboard Bridge Road, Middle River Road, between there and to the east of there. And once again, if I were to flip back, you would see that tracks pretty well with median household income. All right, let's talk about education. School enrollment. So this is your share of population over the age of 3 that's enrolled in school, and Western Connecticut factors in pretty heavily there in that darker purple area right in the middle. It includes Western, I believe. It grabs their campus.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do see is you have a lot of school-age children and or university students, or anyone involved and anyone enrolled in some sort of school, full or part-time. And the lowest enrollment being the lighter pink areas that you have. The highest, that sliver out to the west, and I don't know, I know Western Connecticut has their remote campus up in theirs. I don't know what the residency of the dorms is there, if that's playing much of a factor. But it may also be that you have a lot of school-aged children in this area. And also, your east side of town is higher in school enrollment than the south side of town. And this is percentage, so this isn't pure numbers. So that, may suggest more family households with school-aged children on the east side of town.
Mm.
Once again, this is our first look at the numbers and what they mean. So we're still doing a lot of interpreting with respect to what are the forces behind this and what drives it. And that's exactly what we're going to spend the next several months figuring out. So when we think about school enrollment, the way this would factor in to POCD is starting to think about, well, do your schools have capacity for students? Are there certain schools that are under-enrolled? Are there certain areas of town that have high potential for growth, where you might need to be thinking about expanding schools? Are there schools that should be closed? These are all the things that factor into policies around town facilities, including schools. Okay. Educational attainment. Now this is in this case, this is the highest degree achieved. And so those with only a high school diploma, the darker area is the greater share of the population. And what we see is those darker yellow-green areas have the highest share of the population, 35 to 40% only have a high school diploma. That's their highest educational attainment. And the lightest color, the lightest yellow there out to the west. And I keep referencing this area to the west. Is there a neighborhood name for this area that's most appropriate to use? Arnie?
I think they would call it the Ant Hack area, Sharon. Would that be a fair? And again, this Ant Hack, H-A-C-K. That was I think the name of the original residential development up there. Is that correct?
And Hack is
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, and Hack, and I mean, I think it extends a little farther past that, because that's really on the western side, but I think it pulls in some other neighborhoods as well. But for right now, yes, that I said, if you were gonna divide up the city into quadrants, I would say the west side is kind of sort of known like that, north of 84.
It's a big geography.
Yeah.
Or would you maybe call it the King Street area?
Yeah, Dan Hack, King Street.
Yeah, King Street,
Yeah.
Middle River. Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say all three.
Okay. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. I'll try to pin you down on some of that. So that area, it's well, we'll get to that in the next slide. So there are more people with a higher degree. So if we go to bachelor's degree, there it is. The darker color means more people with bachelor's degrees, the highest degree. And we have one more degree after this. It would be graduate and professional degrees. I'll show you in a minute. But what we see here is some of your lowest levels of having a bachelor's degree are found in the core of the city. And once again, this corresponds with median household income, poverty levels as well. Okay, and graduate or professional degree, and that Ant Hack, is it? It doesn't really.
Yeah, that's fine for right now. Yeah, that's right.
You have a lot of folks with higher degrees in that area, so I'm not personally too familiar with that area. I think next time I get out there, I'd like to drive around much of the city. That is, I have to say, as someone from outside of Danbury who has been to Danbury lots of times, I'm most familiar with the core of Danbury, the areas along 84 and Route 7. And the further I get away from those areas, the less familiar I am. So there's a bit of a learning curve here for myself as well. And this pretty much follows the same as the bachelor's degree, where you have your lowest attainment of graduate and professional degrees at the center of the city.
I think if I could just say something, Francis, I think it's going to be interesting if we, over time, the difference in the 2010, 2020, and probably 2030 census, as downtown has changed, because in 2010, Kennedy Flats wasn't there. That's 350 units that, is what, 98, 99% occupied. And then the coming online of the News Times apartments in the next year or so. And what that will do to kind of the downtown core, what the shift will be, not just in income, but also on the educational side of things.
Yeah, those, I think we emphasized this last month, is those trends are really important to understand which direction are things headed. And yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let's talk about your demographics, diversity. White population, greatest concentration at the edges of the city, and this parallels educational attainment, median household income, and lowest concentration in the core of the city, downtown and going east. African American population, it fairly evenly distributed through Danbury, but what we do see, and likewise with Asian population, although we do have a concentration in kind of the northeastern corner of the city. But what we do see is your foreign-born population is really concentrated in the core and eastern part of the city. as well as your Hispanic or Latino population. And the Latino, that would bring in folks from Brazil as well. And so these areas are the same areas that track with, high school diploma attainment, bachelor's, educational levels, income as well, poverty status. There's a tight correlation between these areas, the residents, and income and educational levels. So we're very obviously pointing to areas of need within your community that are showing up on the maps. Median age, your oldest, the north and south, and youngest through the core. In this, very often, when your younger median ages there's a very often strong correlation with downtowns and also with income levels with younger median ages. And here the difference is almost 15 years, ranging from early 30s to mid 40s as median age. When we take a look at your children, your kids and teenagers under 18, we see that just west of the downtown area and then these areas to the east part and extending up to the north as well. And there's some correlation here too between school enrollment and under 18. But the differences here aren't real big. Well, that said, that darkest purple area, you have around 25 to 30% of your population is under 18, whereas that bright magenta or purple color is around 15 to 20%. So there is about a 10 percentage point difference there.
So Francisco, is that 2102, that census tract, the darkest one, just west of downtown?
The number, I forget the number, but okay. Yeah, that's downtown is that magenta area in the middle.
Right, and in the middle.
And then that area is to the immediate west. And it's Kennedy Flats in that area.
No, Kennedy's in downtown, but that to everybody, right, I believe that's like Frank Morris Street School area, heading out. If you were driving on West Street out to Mill Plain, it would be those neighborhoods just, if you're heading west, just to the north, I guess.
Merrimack, Worcester
yes.
Heights.
Yeah.
Highland Avenue.
Exactly, Highland Avenue, right.
So you're real young in that area, and I.
Interesting.
I'm
There's
not
a lot of multifamily there.
If it really attracts families with kids or households with a lot of kids.
I think it's just a dense population,
yeah.
That there's a lot of
and this is percentage.
Poor families, things like
yeah.
that,
Yeah, okay. And then when we look at the other end of the spectrum, retirement age population, it's lowest in the core areas, and you've got a dark purple in the northeast corner is highest. And I know you have some condo associations up there. I don't know if they're age restricted or not, but that might be driving it up.
Those are all also the old lake cottage communities.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. And if you look at the core area, east and west of the downtown, it's pretty low. We're 10 to 15% of population over age 62. That's very, very low. All right. And then elderly population 85 and older. And we have your densest concentration is right that sliver and going up north towards FCI Danbury. you have a concentration there, and you're really low. Well, you're low in the Westcon area for obvious reasons. They're consuming much of the land in that area, but kind of average in the downtown compared to the rest of the city, which is interesting. All right. Okay, that was it on age. Now let's talk about housing itself. Your highest density or concentration of housing is in that immediate, is in downtown itself with that darkest color, and in those areas right around downtown and going to the east. And so here we're talking about in the downtown, more than 8 units per acre, which if you were to think of like 1 acre zoning, that's 8 times the density. And your least dense areas to the northwest and to the south. When we take a look at your renter occupied housing units, what we see is, I think this is pretty obvious, your highest concentration is in the downtown core area. But that being said, your more rural and suburban areas, the south and west, still have a fairly high share of rental housing units in the 20 to 30% range, which somewhat surprised me that it was that high. It is, and you have a lot of single family housing in those areas. I wonder, is that a big market in Danbury, the rental of single family homes? Does anyone have any insight into that?
I think you're right there. There's quite a few in the downtown district, north and south of Main Street in that area, down through there.
That I would expect, but I wonder about single family homes. Is there a big rental market for those?
Like down on Long Ridge, I'm a little stumped on this one because I'm thinking like Long Ridge area. I wouldn't have thought there would be a lot of renter occupied single family homes, but
my feeling is demand has been so high that, if somebody was leaving, and we have had an aging population leaving the state, if it was vacant, it could be rented.
That's, good point. Very, very good point.
This is from
these are 20,
data. This is a 5-year rolling average.
Right.
So it tends to even out anything more recent that's happening.
I wonder too, Sharon, if there's any of that pre-existing non-conforming in the zoning, where it might be zoned as one thing but used as another.
We definitely have some of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying Westwood Village isn't non-conforming, because it is conforming, but actually it is. I think it is non-conforming at this point. But yeah, I mean, that's several hundred units on the west side, which would, right above 84. So that can skew it too.
Yeah, I mean, the density of single family units and just the volume of them is so low in the south part of the city that it doesn't take a lot of apartments to account for a large share.
Right. So it's a function of the total, the percent, obviously, the percentage. So that'll turn the color.
Okay. Owner occupied housing is highest. You have a cluster, that dark kind of raisin purple in the northeast corner. That would be on the other side of the lake or the reservoir from the prison. Does anyone know what that area is that's accounting for the 90+% homeowners?
So I believe that's like the Bear Mountain area.
Okay. Yeah, very, very high ownership in that area. And to the north of 84 in general, very, very high.
Bear Mountain is actually just north of
You're right.
Okay. And of course, lowest in the city core.
I'm sorry,
Right.
Tim, what did you
Yeah,
say about
go
that?
back.
Can we go back for a sec? Tim,
Yep.
no.
Yeah, no, just above FCI is the Bear Mountain area. Where you see the Bear Mountain area end is actually the line or the shoreline of the part of the lake. So that area on the other side is actually going to be Great Plain and
Right, Hawthorne,
Rough
something.
Loop. And then you're going to see the darker color actually goes into 40 Acre Mountain Road and
Yeah.
travels out to White Turkey Extension.
Right,
Okay.
That's really all, for the most part, lake deeded properties around that loop.
right, single family.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all single
Okay.
family.
All right. So let's move on to households. Household size. And the household size, and here we have a couple of institutions, both FCI Danbury and Western, that are really throwing things off. I'm not sure how FCI counts their households, but so those numbers skew the map a little bit, and the same with WestCon. I don't know if a household is a dorm or what it is. But looking beyond those, what we see is we have the biggest household size just west of the downtown, and that's the same place where we have lots and lots of children. So that corresponds, right? Bigger household implies lots of kids. So we have our highest school enrollment coming from that area. And outside of that, once again, household sizes are largest north of 84 and tend to be smallest south of 84 in the southern part of the city.
Okay, Fran, so so 53, if 53 is Main Street, then east of 53 would be like Liberty Street and those neighborhoods, Cottage, around there.
Yeah, north,
like Fairfield. And
north
then,
of the rail line and the station is WestCon.
right, oh, okay.
Yeah, the area to the south of that, there's a little bit of industrial land and maybe some apartments. I'm not too familiar with it.
I think Fairfield Ridge is over there, Tim, right? I'm trying to.
Yeah, Fairfield Ridge is going to be on the south side near where you see 53's.
Exactly, right.
And then you're going to follow that up and you're actually going through Merrimack and those neighborhoods. And then you're going to go up into the Highland Avenue neighborhood that I was talking. No, actually that's on the other side.
No,
No.
right.
Yeah, so you're going to be actually going in, you see the two parallel lines. One of them looks like North Street and the other one's going to be White Street. So you're in between North and White, which has some concentration of the school and some commercial. And then you're going to be heading up into, actually a lot of that in that area is the cemetery and the homes around the cemetery below the hospital, I think. Is that
Triangle Street would be the southeastern border, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Francisco, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I see obviously on the bottom, there's 2, 4, 6, there's 8 different colors of gray in very small increments. Is there a reason why it stops at 3.2? Because there's a lot of households in Danbury with more than 3.2 people in them.
Because that's the average. So that's the highest end of the average. So that's why it stops at that number. There are households with 6 people in them, and there are households with 1 people in them and 1 person in them, and you average them out.
Yeah, I would expect a little more density in a chart like this than this show. But again, it's just a function of the numbers that and the arithmetic of the area that could be, if there's only one. If one area is concentrated at 3 people, but the makeup of the rest of that area is single family, that doesn't have a lot of people. But I'm surprised to see the gray being as light as it is throughout the city.
Okay.
I think it's also, Vinny, a function of that we're at the tract level, and when you break it down to kind of 5 or 6 blocks where we intuitively know what's going on in the city. But when you look at the numbers on a tract level, it changes it to a light gray when there's actually pockets of what we would think and know as being probably dark gray in the middle of that. It just averages it out, I think.
Yeah, that makes
That's what I
sense.
would guess.
I wasn't thinking it from a track perspective. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
And in spite of what you may have experienced in certain parts of the city with big households, the household size trends have been going down for a long time now. People are having fewer kids, and another shortfall of census data and American Community Survey data is that it sometimes does not accurately reflect all the people that are living in a unit, even though that it's trying to do so, but those people aren't always forthcoming about volunteering that information. So it very often underreports when you have more than one family in a unit. Okay, well, let's keep going. We have a little more data on households themselves. So we go back to income, but we take a look at it from a household perspective. What you see is your moderate household incomes in terms of their cost of housing are spending now this map has it as Mill Plain area and Hack up there. What we see for moderate income households, and this moderate would be just below the median, is that your highest share of housing costs of income towards housing is being spent by people in that area. And that is likely moderate income people that are struggling to be in that part of town, is what it is, struggling to afford housing in that part of town. And it's actually lowest in the center of town because that's probably where housing is more affordable, and you have a little less demand from moderate income people who are otherwise trying to get elsewhere. And I took one of a couple of maps on this. There are a bunch of different ways to slice this data. So we can and will at next month, as a matter of fact, dive much deeper into housing and housing costs and housing affordability. I just wanted to give you a sense as to what it looked like. Anything more than 30% of a household income, with that income going towards housing costs, which could be mortgage, and insurance and taxes, or rent and utilities, is considered housing cost burden. And so what we see here is the lightest colors are just below that 30%, and the purples are all up, and darker purples are all up and above 30%. Housing value. Your highest housing values are found in the northwest corner of town. And that brings us back to maybe likely why, and this is the prior slide, why the moderate income households are spending such a big share of their income on housing is because those houses were expensive. They have big mortgages. Otherwise, much of the city is pretty consistent with respect to housing costs or housing value, and in the 100s to 200s range, upper 100s to lower 200 range. As much of the city, and by Fairfield County standards, that's pretty affordable. Okay. Household turnover. This would be households moving in and out of house. How long have they been there and how long do they stay there? And this is going back over the last 10 years to 2010. And so this is the share of people who have moved since that time into or out of housing. And what we see is you have the most moves in the downtown area and immediately west of downtown. You have the most housing transiency in those areas. And then next to that would be the southern part of the city and the lowest in the Ant-Hack Mill Plain area to the west in that, and then east of the lake. And I forget the name of the area now you're talking about before. It's labeled here as Pleasant Acres. But that's the same area that corresponds with very high home ownership. So we expect to see very low transiency in that area. Okay. Subsidized housing. And this is going back to affordable housing. So these are folks with HUD subsidies and other types of vouchers. And what you can see on the map is that the highest concentrations are in the very eastern part of the city and immediately in the downtown area. Which, and interestingly, the southern part of the city has shows up with the, relatively high number of vouchers. But let me say, this is not a percentage, this is a number. And so if you look at a big geographic area, you're going to get more numbers. And these numbers are still pretty small. We're in the below 100 for these geographic areas. So those aren't real big numbers. Okay, back to households. Your highest percentage of family households, and a family household constitutes, a married couple, a couple with children, basically related persons living together, any related persons living together. So not included with that would be roommates and singles, someone living by themselves. And the largest share of those family households, over 70% for the most part, in the north part of the city. And to the south part of the city, you're in the 60s, and at the core, in the downtown area, you're in the 50%. So only about half the households are family households. All right, let's talk about land use a little bit, because this is really going to set us up for a discussion about these different areas of Danbury and what do we call what and what do we group with what, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Most of the city is zoned for single-family residential, which is not, it's probably more typical of a Connecticut city, but it is not that typical of a city to have this share of single-family residential. That being said, you do have a lot of commercial and industrial, but what we do see is the areas you have zoned for multifamily residential or mixed use, that being residential commercial, are relatively small given the size of the city. So that the yellow, orange areas are residential areas, with the light yellow tan area being single family, the orange areas being multifamily, the brownish areas being the highest density, kind of high rise, 4-5 stories plus, multifamily. The light blue being light industrial, dark blue general industrial, the magenta being, and red being commercial areas. And as you can see, all of that commercial development is on this spine of 84 and your rail corridor, with some threads of it following your state routes, 37, 53, and 7. Okay. And your open space, as I mentioned before, this is designated open space. So it's state, town open space, conservation land, school athletic fields, cemeteries, etc. Most of that's concentrated in the south, and you have quite a bit in the north that's that's scattered. And you do have some designated open space that comes in through the center of town.
Yeah, I have to give you the west side piece doesn't show up on here, which is just
Yeah.
north of 84 on the
Okay.
west side.
All right.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So now I'd like to have that conversation about areas of the city. And we did a mapping exercise last week. And we're really looking to identify and carve up, and this is based on zoning and land use and our understanding of the city, these different discrete areas, if you want to call them that. And what we saw, and I look forward to your input on this, is around 8 or 10 or so discrete areas. You could say this part is all pretty similar and characteristic. Yeah, there may be some differences in the age of the housing and some differences in the density, and the landscape might look a little different, but it's mostly all this. And so starting at the top, that whole northwest area, west of the lake and north of 84, is all pretty low density residential, good forest cover, lots of water bodies. And the same to the northeast corner. It looks very similar. It's some slightly denser developments, some more condo type developments in the northeast corner. And then moving to the south, you have these commercial areas that include industrial and the airport and the mall and strip malls and also office areas, all sorts of retail. And those you could kind of aggregate all together. So there's that yellow area to the west along 84 and 7, that includes the airport and the mall. And at the other end of the city, that eastern area near the 7 and 84 junction at the other end, you have a lot of industrial there. You have a sliver of it that follows the rail corridor and comes into the downtown. Then you have the WestCon and Danbury Hospital campuses, I'll call them, including a big cemetery in the downtown that are north of the downtown that are right in the core there, and that's dark blue. You have the downtown itself. You have this ring of residential, kind of small lot, older homes, a lot of it single family residential, just ringing the downtown. You have a pocket of residential that's tucked in behind the airport, which is really interesting. I think you have to drive around the airport maybe to get to it. I don't know if there's any roads from New York State going into that area. I think there's one. And then you have the southern part of the city, which is your lowest density area. There's really not a lot of houses in that area. Most of it's protected open space.
Could I make a query about this slide?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I see the campus area, and it's all south of 84. But WestCon's western campus is on the north side of 84. Where is that?
Yeah, it is. I didn't call it out separately because it is detached and it's kind of consumed by the rest of this residential area. It's just tucked into it. We could think about changing that map to grab that as part of one big campus area, but it's otherwise enveloped by residential development. It's just on the border. We grabbed their downtown campus, if you want to call it that, because it's right adjacent to Danbury Hospital, and it's pretty easy to carve out that whole area as this larger institutional setting.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I think I agree with Joel that I think we're going to need to take a look at that area.
Okay.
Put in a campus on the west side. And I mean, this is a good map for everybody to really like stare at and think about, when we look at the city, like the Western residential, well, what's shown as Western commercial, I mean, that includes, this yellow includes the Reserve and the Summit, which we now know is more residential than it is commercial. So that green Western residential might have to wrap around and, to follow the Ridgefield boundary line. But again, I mean, this is like what makes you think about, I don't know, or it's missing this piece, or, this color needs to, move around, or something like that. So I think it's a good map to for all of us to look at and think about and come back with, make it look like this, or, make notes on it for what you know about the city. Because I think we do have to make some changes to it, definitely.
Yeah, this is intended to be exactly what it's doing right now, as a springboard for discussion. This is not like a future land use map that we've got it figured out and this is what your city is, right? This is how we see it. The city carved up into discrete areas. And now you tell us what you think. Sharon and I had a conversation about the value of identifying unique areas of the city. And it may be helpful because the city differs quite a bit from north, south, east to west, inside to out. And while many of the recommendations of the plan are going to be universal, they're going to be relevant to the entire city and municipal operations. A lot of the recommendations may be very focused towards a geography. And I think based upon some of the maps and demographics we showed you, I think it's clear that the central part of the city, in that eastern edge, it's likely going to have more needs with respect to whether it be investment by the city or programs or whatever it may be than other areas of the city. And it'd be helpful to be able to call out those areas in a succinct way rather than naming streets.
Can I jump on that back one more time?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
It is a slide or two back when we were looking at single family.
You want me to go back to it?
Yeah, sure. The single family being the bulk of Danbury.
Yeah. The zoning slide. Yeah, right there.
I think there's a simple question here as what want to be a metropolis concentration of a lot of multifamilies and really attract a lot of people to town, or do we want to be more of a bedroom community, a little more laid back, a little slower lifestyle, if you will? And right now, what this map indicates to me is this little more of a bedroom community. And if we change that focus to more and more multifamily, we change the whole nature of the town. And I'm just saying, throw that out as a caution when recommendations start going around that I don't know how other people feel, but I've been in this town 40 years. I've seen a lot of change, become more commercial actually, and I kind of miss that slower pace. I miss that fair instead of that mall. That's me, but I just want to caution about making recommendations to change the core nature of this town. That was it.
Sorry, I was muted. I do think, though, that all of these slides really kind of confirm, in a sense, about the growth area being centered around the corridor, the I-84 corridor, and you could still have the bedroom part, the bedroom community, as you were saying, part of the city. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, I guess, is my point.
Well, I guess I didn't say it, but the more multifamily you put in, that encourages population growth.
I think one of the biggest things I got out of the slides today was the rentals of single family homes
Yeah, right.
increasing so much. That's scary. When people aren't living and cutting their own grass in single family homes and they're renting them out to others, they don't care about them as much. I'd love to know what's driving that and how we reverse that trend to get people living in their own backyards again, because that's the slippery slope that you go from, from a bunch of single family homes to people dividing their property into other uses.
Yeah, this is Arnie. I was surprised to see that too. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to rent in Danbury, obviously there's plenty of condominiums that have rental units available. There's been a significant increase in construction of apartments in recent years.
Yeah.
I was unaware of, but I could be wrong, believe me, but I was unaware of any surge in single family homes being rented to others. I could be wrong, but I just thought that for the average person that wanted to rent Danbury, there's plenty of other opportunities rather than a single family home.
So
Could you go back to that slide for Francisco?
Yeah. In response to that, once again, we're not showing trends here. This is a 5-year rolling average is a point in time. Let me go back to it though.
Francisco, Perry here. I would think part of it is also that high housing cost burden that we see, that it definitely reflects, a higher demand for rental housing than we're able to provide.
Renter occupied housing units.
So we can dive deeper into these numbers for the next meeting to understand what's behind them, what's driving this. Is it a couple of developments that are throwing up the numbers for the entire census tract? A couple of apartment or developments.
Well, let me just say, okay, so on that very point, on the west side, south of 84, in the reserve, there's Crown Point, 400. There's 400 units there. There's 400 units at BLTs, which are all in that far corner, which could skew the entire tract.
Yeah.
Right, everybody?
Absolutely.
I think I mean, this darker blue that kind of looks like an upside down heart. I mean, that's like Southern, and I think that's Southern Boulevard and Mountainville or something. So if you just, think about it in terms of the new rental units being built.
I'd sure like to drill down on those numbers too. They don't really make a lot of sense to me, especially in the southern area in Fred Visconti's ward. I mean, could it be in-law apartments?
I doubt it. Yeah, those usually comprise a really, really small number of households. So I very much doubt it's that.
Well, it's anomalous to us, and we not only we live here, some of us are actually in the business, so something's going on. And as you stated, Francisco, it wasn't a percentage; it was an absolute number. So,
this number is percentage.
This is a
well,
percentage.
these are percentage.
Yeah.
There was one slide with the owner-occupied, rental-occupied housing where I think there was a slide where it was not a percentage, but in total units.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll send out
housing.
Yeah, we'll send out the PowerPoint to everybody after the meeting so you can flip back through the slides and take a look at them. But I think that's when we're going to need to drill down from the track to the several blocks and see. And Jen and I can, bang our heads together and figure out, oh, that's that development, and things like that. And that again, that'll skew the whole track.
Well, Sharon, I do know, and correct me if I'm wrong, along Route 37, along the North Street corridor, so north of 84, you've got north of the North Street Shopping Center, you've got 3 or 4 condo developments up there, smack dab in the middle of the commercial. I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but you also have, as you head north near before FCI, you've got that condo development up there. So you've got some multifamily along Route 37.
Yeah. The
that
question
could
is,
be
are they
skewing.
renting out their condos or are they living, you know what I mean? Which is
Right.
Tim's point, is right. The investment is not the same.
Correct.
If it's owner versus renter occupied, necessarily, not across the board. So,
Wasn't there a slide for single family houses that were being rented, or did I conflate that with
No.
something else?
No, we don't have a slide for that.
Okay, all right.
I think we're just all looking at this going, wow, look at the whole southern part. How is that renter occupied? But like, think about Crown Point, think about BLT. It's like, you could bet be 900 units there. That's a lot.
When we look at those areas, first thing we think of is single homes
Right.
dominating those areas.
Yeah, and the other thing that really jumped out was the fact that the turnover in the south was as high as the turnover in the reserve, and I just found that that just did not mesh with my experience at all.
Okay.
I mean, the turnover in the reserve is the same as Stars Plain and West Reading. Some of those people have been there for 150 years. They modeled for Grant Wood. I mean, some of those people have been there forever. And whenever I'm up in the reserve, people have been there. And they ask, where can I get a coffee in this town? Because they got here 5 minutes ago.
Okay. All right.
But to go back to the slide that kind of precipitated the discussion, I mean, I think that's the good slide to, we should all look at and say, yeah, no, this green, sure, this should be some other area, or this should be, or something's missing. So take a little time kind of to look at it. Now, I will also share with you guys, and I sent it to Francisco, couple of years back, Lisa Marcy, the former health director, and I were looking, when they were starting to plan for the 2020 census, they thought they could change the census designated places in Danbury. So they gave us a map, Westcog. They said, hey, you want to break this down? And Lisa wanted some information. So I did this whole map, and I had way more areas than this, too many, but I broke it down, and she wanted it to look for some health information on neighborhoods. And I'd be more than willing to share that. I scanned it in, and that'll help kind of put streets to areas for everybody. I think maybe that'll be a little helpful. 4 or 5 of them could be the north, Yeah,
I didn't think of including it. We use that as kind of a starting point when we started to build this map. I didn't think of also plugging it in here, but I could plug it right into the presentation if you'd like.
But if people want to see it, or I could send it to you. But I mean, it's a lot more neighborhoods, but it's all broken down in the names that we all will relate to.
Right.
So I could definitely send that out. But I think this is worth that further discussion and, breaking down and looking at the city and some geographies. Because Joel, there may be some things in some areas that we want to talk about. In some areas, you don't want the same recommendations from a planning perspective. So, and there's limitations as well.
What the southern area I've been referencing, what would you call that area? There's kind of an east and west side to it following the roads, but what would you call that area?
Long Ridge or Stars Plain?
Yep.
You call it after the road name, basically.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a particular neighborhood. Some of the areas have neighborhood names. Up off of 40 Acre Mountain, you're going to be able to call that Hawthorne Terrace, or Anti-Hack, just north of 84 on the west side. So you're going to have some of those, but for the most part, I think a lot of people don't have spatial recognition when looking at a map. By identifying it by major roadways will immediately, get your bearings on that map.
Yeah, Tim's right. Francisco, if you can share the map, that the one I sent you, I think that's exactly what I was doing, Tim.
Okay.
There's a lot of different, granted, a lot of different neighborhoods because we were trying to serve a different purpose, but it just may help kind of look at things.
And, Francisco, this is Arnie, my wife's from Waterbury, and, they've got some very distinct areas in Waterbury, Town Plot, Bunker Hill, East Mountain. We don't really have that in Danbury as much. There's some, but it's not as defined and as well recognized as it is, say, in a Waterbury. You say
Right.
Town Plot or East Mountain and Waterbury, you know exactly where you're talking about.
And
I wish we had more of that because it contributes to a sense of identity.
Yes, absolutely. We don't.
It
We might
does.
say the area,
Yeah.
Long Ridge Road, Lake Wabika, whatever. but
Yeah,
we don't.
right. I was going to say the southern part includes Wabika.
Yeah.
A lot of open space, a lot of state-owned land.
A lot of wetland. One of the reasons why it's so hard to develop. It's very wet down there.
And it's and grade, the slopes.
Yeah. Slopey. Yeah, it's interesting. Slopey and wet.
Right, exactly.
But Moses Mountain, places like that.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on the map? Good. So, like before, we'll send this out, and it'll be available on the website too. And I think it'd be helpful if you could get us a marked up copy if you're interested in whatever format is convenient for you, whether it's you print it and draw on it and write names of different areas of the city, or make annotations like, Western's other campus or whatever other area that you think is kind of unique from what we have it labeled as now, and get that to us in any way that you can. Drop it off, mail it to Sharon, drop it off, scan it, email it, or mark up PDF, whatever's convenient for you. Get that back to us, and let's use this as a working map going forward. Ideally, we'd get to as we start drafting the POCD document, we'll have a map similar to this that we can use to reference different parts of the city that may have unique needs from other parts of the city. Okay. I did have a slide here for our discussion, and I think what we'll do is Rory Fitzgerald from my office is on the call. She's been taking notes, and we'll plug your comments into this slide so we have it recorded for the meeting. Of course, Sharon and Jennifer do a great job of documenting all these meetings, so we will not forget or lose track of your thoughts regarding these issues. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, I'd like to talk about our public engagement process. And admittedly, we've been sitting on it a little bit. And that's really, we're trying to see where things are going to go with respect to the ability to meet in person and do any sort of events. And Sharon and I have talked about this. We're just carefully watching it. But as we do so, we're trying to build a list of key stakeholders that we'd like to be able to call upon and invite to focus group meetings or stakeholder interviews. And so we have a very, very basic list that we're starting with here. Include individuals and organizations that we would like to reach out to. And I'd like to open up to you now to tell us, because we know we're missing a lot of people and plenty of organizations that are not accounted for here. And tell us who we're missing. And if there's someone that you're aware of right now, feel free to speak up, tell us who it is or what the organization is. We'll write it down. And as I mentioned before, we're going to share this slideshow with you, and feel free to get us an email with a list of contacts. All right, the floor is yours.
Sharon, I think, as you know, we're developing the local emergency planning committee membership, and I think a lot of that membership, once I've codified that, I'll share that with you. But that's the business community, the key stakeholders in the community that need to be participatory in this process. And I'll get that list over to you so we can work in parallel process.
Good.
Yeah, like we don't even have the hospital on here, so
You're right.
of course, yeah. I mean, yeah, it was just like I was actually pulled from various emails and that people have been sending me since we started this process, and just trying to get yes, Paul, I agree. A list going.
Great.
I have as a group that might be interested in, we should probably get involved. There's a big population of the Dominican community in town, and I think that the Dominican Club of Connecticut, which is based out of Danbury, is probably one of the key groups that should be involved.
Okay.
Yeah, again, this was just a real quick pulling together of from emails and thoughts, but no way in the final list. And again, as Francisco said, we just been monitoring kind of what's going on and how we can do things, in considering, the state of COVID and vaccinations and things like that. So the list will never stop. Obviously, there won't be said, this is the end, you can't add anybody to it. That's not what this process is about. So the more the merrier, and we'll just keep adding people that we think would be and can contribute to the process, which is what we want. This is a plan for the city.
Yeah, this is a very slow moving train that's slowly leaving the station.
Yeah.
But as we get going a little bit, will people be able to run and grab a handle and pull themselves on? And this train doesn't leave the station until we take the plan to public hearing for approval. So the process can remain open throughout. And that being said, the more people we can get on this train at the station while it's parked, the better. So.
Hey, Perry, isn't there a young professionals group as well, and a PJ that you guys are involved with?
Still keep it, the lines of communication open. It's more on social media than anything right now. But PJ had started the youth council with Chambers, so that was kind of taking off before COVID. So we do have a group there as well, a couple of different groups.
Okay, good. And we can share our social media posts with, you can share them for us on the, if there's other groups that you think it's a good outreach. So again, the more the merrier.
Some of the groups, is Tim again, some of the groups I have that we work with are Friends of the Lake. Now, I don't know if they have actually, they have an interest in Danbury, but they may not have, be citizens of Danbury, like First Light as owns the lake. So groups like that, I don't know, we also have some teachers on here, but the Board of Education should be listed as well as WestCon. And you're going to see those with the emergency management list that Matt's putting together, I believe, are also going to be on there.
Yeah, and the business community as well. And there's business people in there, although that list is geared a little bit more towards kind of the emergency preparedness for hazmat related things, but people in the business community.
Yeah, the city's departments and boards and commissions and committees that's the obvious for us. We'll be populating with those for any sort of meetings. What we're really trying to get at here is out into the neighborhoods and the folks that might not be aware of that will help us reach out to the community as a whole.
And I might suggest that I heard somebody mention reaching out to the Dominican population. If we can start looking at, if you will, ethnicity, I think we ought to include everyone as a major population. You've got Ecuadorians, Brazilians, Mexicans, all have substantial populations in this town. I wouldn't restrict it to, say, one like the Dominicans.
So I'd add men's club, women's club, garden club. You know, they all have several hundred members and they're spread across the city. So those might be good choices. And then you've got the fraternal organizations.
Oh, that's right. You're
Right.
totally-
So you've got like the Kiwanis,
Yeah,
you've got the
right.
Rotary, you have, you know, all of those groups. So in addition to the social clubs, you know, the groups like Lions Club would be an excellent one. So all you have to do is send, you know, populate one person from the club into the list and then they share with the club. So
Okay.
we can get you those lists.
Yeah, Sharon, or Francisco, like Bridget just said, the Lions Club, you can contact Diane Yemen at City Hall. She's the president of the club. Also, Long Ridge Road Association. They have quite a few people up there.
Mhm.
Okay.
I would also add the PTOs. So the Board of Ed is excellent.
Right.
You have the PTOs for each of the elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school. They all have their own Facebook groups. They all have their own way of communicating. So they're really engaged right now on social media. And so those would all be, you know, good choices.
Okay. Good, good. All right.
And, I'm sorry, Richard, Janelle had indicated to me in a previous email about the Board of, you know, working with the Board of Ed, and I just forgot to put that on here, so I apologize for that. But again, it's just a start of a list.
Can we add the library too? Both libraries,
Yes,
so Danbury
yes.
Library and Long Ridge. Danbury Library social media reaches about 100,000 per month across their 5 different platforms. So that would be a good choice.
Good. Yeah, with respect to Board of Education, I do think it's really important to bring them into the fold. They do all of their own strategic planning and demographic planning and master planning, capital planning. But there is an interface between education and those facilities, which are town facility or city facilities in this case, and the POCD. There is some area of overlap there, and so it's best that they're part of the process.
We know from that discussion, right, Paul and Fred, from last night, when the city council approved the
Just last night.
Yeah, the $99 million bond for the
Sure.
Danbury Career Academy. So
there it is, right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've written down a bunch of ideas. We'll start adding those to the list, and please do, as you have thoughts about who we should be reaching out to, follow up with as much contact information as you can get.
Yeah, you can email me, myself or Jen, and we'll just keep adding to the list with everybody. I've been taking notes as well. Good.
All right. I'd like to talk about our website, and let me apologize. I think we had promised some statistics in the agenda, and Lumi, who had built our site and is currently maintaining it, unfortunately did not activate tracking when they put it online, but they have promised me it has since been activated, so we will be able to track visitations to the site, length of stay on the site, etc. And we're also in the process of Lumi is going to grant my staff management access to the website so that we can we have a little more control over it and can get things posted a lot quicker. But
Yeah,
the site
I would just say a lot of the visits might have been mine and Jen's because we kept
and mine too.
And yours, right? And yours.
Yeah. But we've been live for a few weeks now. So it's great to have that presence, and URLs at the top of the screen there. We have all of this committee's meeting information is now on the site. You can go to the Oversight Committee tab on the right, and there's a pull-down menu for our agendas, the presentations, and meeting summaries, as well as meeting schedule. And all of our work product is going to be put up on the site, including announcements for any events that we hold in meetings, as well as schedules, agendas, etc. So this is our one-stop repository for information. It's linked directly from the city's website, as well from the planning and zoning page. So it's very easy to get to, and it's very user-friendly. And I promise next meeting we'll have some stats on how many visits we got. I know that we've had some pretty good press coverage. Sharon, did you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of articles written after your presentation, the last meeting, just the demographic information. So that, in that respect, that's good. We're on the front page a lot. So just to, keep people motivated and interested in what's going on, I'm sure they'll be looking to see, what this meeting was about. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a follow-up article, but, the more press, the better, I think.
Yep. All right, let's go to our schedule. We're inching along here. We're making progress. We're, roughly halfway through our discovery process. So we're now sitting on a whole lot of information, a lot of mapping that we've generated. And of course, we have yet to start shaping that into anything. It's just exactly what it's called, it's discovery. This is new information to us. I know many of you have a strong sense for these issues and numbers we're talking about, but I hope some of that information is new to you in a way. Public engagement. So our first big push was the website to make a formal announcement and to establish a presence with the public. And we have a whole game plan for public engagement. And we are just holding off a little bit to schedule any events until we have some reassurance that we can do so, in compliance with all the guidelines and in a safe way as well. I think one of the first things we would be interested in doing is to formulate an online survey. It can be a great tool for, promoting the planning process, educating people about what it is and what it involves, the various issues that the plan will cover, and getting some feedback in the real near term about people's ideas on issues and what's most important to them. So I expect that will be one of the earliest things that we do. And typically we like to launch that in association with a bunch of planned events. So we can use the survey to generate interest in attending an event. So I think it would be a little early to launch something in the next month or so, because we haven't quite figured out our schedule of events and how things will play out. I could tell you that people are getting Zoom fatigue. There's no question about that. It was a novelty in the beginning. It was kind of people had nothing else to do. Many of them, you had a captive audience. And so I'm a little reluctant to go heavy on Zoom for our outreach. And if that were something we were trying to fit in over the next couple of months, it's likely what we'd be stuck with. So Sharon, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say about our approach to the outreach in our schedule.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to make it clear that we're just not going to hang around and put it off. It was just a matter of what's going on, like currently, right this moment, and is this the right time? And because we started early, our schedule affords us to, slip back a month if we need to. and see where we are on with all the protocols and things like that. And as we begin to open up, as we all know, there may be more opportunities for these events later in the summer than earlier in the summer. But I do want to keep the interest in what we're doing. I want to be out there. So, they write about it from the slides. Good, that's fine. Because the more press we get, I think the better and the more interested people will be. So, I mean, this process comes around once every 10 years. So, as I said in the beginning, we've changed a lot in the last 10 years. So, yeah, I think that's basically what Francisco and I had spoken about. If anybody feels really strongly one way or another, let us know. But the intent from the very beginning has always been that we want this process to be participatory from all the sectors of the community. Anybody who wants to say something will have the opportunity to say something throughout the process. The more insight that we can get into what the issues are and how people feel, I think the better it'll be. And the plan will represent the community.
Okay, thanks, Sharon.
Thanks.
Otherwise, we're still right on schedule. We're probably delayed in starting to actually meet with people, but as Sharon mentioned, we have plenty of time to do so still. And with respect to our technical work, we're right on schedule. And I appreciate everyone holding our regular meeting schedule. It helps keep us moving forward. So let's talk about moving forward. Next steps. We're, as I mentioned, gearing up for that direct outreach to the community. And then we're going to take a deep dive in housing. We do have a sub-consultant on our firm, RKG Associates out of Massachusetts. And they are housing and economic specialists. So they know housing very well. They understand the demographic forces and the economic forces behind housing and the status of the market as well. They've done a lot of work in Connecticut and Massachusetts, so they know our market pretty well. And they're actively working on preparing for next month's meeting, and I expect it to be a similar dive as our past two meetings, and more, but actually more detailed, because we're going to be focused on housing issues and housing affordability issues as well. So our staff, my staff, and Eric Halverson from RKG, who will be presenting next meeting, have been working on that. We'll continue to be working on the housing issue all through and up till next month's meeting. Right, and that meeting, as a reminder, is happening on Tuesday, May 18th at our usual time. And we'll have a very similar agenda and schedule for that meeting. And our meeting dates through the rest of the year, we will continue to meet on Tuesdays, the middle of the month at 4 p.m. for the rest of the year. Okay, any questions? Any other comments?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And we've got these meetings down to a science. We just about hit 90 minutes on the mark. Although I don't mind the ones where we really go back and forth for a while, if that's what it takes. But I appreciate everyone being here. I've said it before, but we're working in a vacuum unless we have you as a sounding board and you to direct us. So I appreciate your part in this.
Thank you.
Good presentation, Francisco. Good presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We'll
Great.
follow up. We'll send this out shortly.
Yeah,
Very good.
and I'll send out that other map too, just so you guys have the idea of what we were thinking of from, again, another purpose, but it just kind of puts the geographies in perspective for the areas that we know. Okay, let's see, let's stop sharing. You want to stop sharing?
Yeah, I'll stop sharing.
Okay, and then if anybody has anything else, anything comes up, any name pops up to you at 3 a.m, because I'm usually awake, just send me an email. Yeah. And we'll put everybody's name on the list. So unless anybody has anything else, again, thank you all for your comments and for attending. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn, unless anybody has a comment.
So moved.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Mr. Visconti, seconded by Mr. Salvain. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Great. Thank you, everybody. See you next
Thank
month.
you.
Thanks for
you.